Welcome back. All right, in this section, we're going to talk about barriers to learning. So, adult people and so do children have different types of barriers, and we have to be aware that there's types of barriers to learning. So, what some of these barriers are, one of the first ones we're going to talk about is situational barriers. The next one is institutional barriers, and then there's dispositional barriers, academic barriers, and employment training barriers and cultural barriers. So the first one we're going to talk about is situational barriers. So the big one is like you want to take education, you're going to go sign up for a class, but between work and family, that you have all this stuff going on in your life that you got to manage to be able to figure out how you're going to go to school and take some education. And that basically means that you have only so much time during the day that you can dedicate to education and learning. So it makes it really hard if you're trying to squeeze some type of education in. Situational barriers is another one is work schedules. If you're on a shift worker and say you want to take your traditional class at university that runs Monday to Friday and you work a 4 on 4 off shift with 2 days and 2 nights, it makes it very difficult for you to actually attend those classes. So there's also those kind of barriers. Another situational barrier that is huge nowadays is childcare. It's very hard to find childcare. It's hard for people to get their children looked after so they can excel and move ahead through taking some education. Another situation where just being able to get to the location, right? So just having enough type of transportation, be able to afford the transportation, even if you just take a bus, that's fantastic. But if you're taking a night shift, because that's the only time you can, or a night course is the only time that you can actually get to the class, is there a bus actually leaving later that night? Cost, just getting into the situation, just the cost alone getting to take a course is one of the barriers to learning. Institutional barriers, one of the ones that we'll talk about is just the institution itself, the cost of actually the institution, the classroom itself. Is the classroom warm? Is it too cold? Is the room set up in a conducive setup for teaching? Is the chair set up in a circle, semicircle, or is it your traditional in lines? And how are you going to build that room in to make it most comfortable and inclusive for people to learn? Also, the institutional barriers that just trying to figure out how the institutions develop their courses. Are their courses actually built with congruency? Do they have enough underpinning knowledge? Do you have enough underpinning knowledge? And if you don't, is there enough scaffolding built into the course? So, do they know their audience, the institution, when they built it? So, a lot of times, part of the institutional barrier comes to the idea of that they're the ones that's developed the course, and maybe it's not on par. Dispositional barriers. So this is kind of like the attitude towards education. If somebody's health is failing, they may find the lack of interest in actually taking a course or becoming a lifelong learner. Maybe this person believes that they already know enough and they don't need to learn anymore. It's kind of more of the attitude and what slows people down to from learning. Academic barriers. Again, we're talking about the idea that maybe you don't have the um, credentials to take that course. You don't have the prereqs to get in. Sometimes it's a financial one again as well. Then we got cultural barriers where we can have two different types of cultures, and depending on where you're going to school, sometimes the schools aren't as inclusive as others, or the education program is not as inclusive as others, and we're not used to understanding that other cultures than what we're familiar with might have a lot more work they need to do outside of coming to school. They have other priorities that are just as equal or high as going to school. So we got to remember as adult learners, as they go through this, that education isn't the most important thing necessarily on their plate. So those are just some quick ideas. We're going to send you on a field trip to a website. It goes through the situational barriers, the institutional barriers, the dispositional barriers, the academic barriers, employment training barriers, and cultural barriers. We didn't talk much about the employment training barriers, but that's just the idea that if you want an employee to go get trained, you got to look at things like whether do they have the education, the prereqs to get into the course that you'd want them to train on, or if you're making the training, you got to understand that the business is your business and they're your employees. So you got to make sure that they find the engagement, like what's in it for them. All right, we'll see you in the next one.